This is a story about Alex, a man with superpowers. You probably already thought that the main character will soar above the clouds, burn metal with lasers from his eyes, run very fast, and all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, that's not the case. At least for now, he's pretty far away from lasers. At this point, Alex's superpower is a useless one that no one would ever want for themselves. The question then arises as to why the most pathetic superhero of all is chained to a cross in front of an angry mob, egging him on as his power is clearly not worthy of such attention. Despite his deplorable position in the event, Alex remained optimistic, saying that the view up here is good and he is not afraid of heights at all. Of course, optimism is good, but if things continue like this, the guy will be left in the dust. That's why it's urgent to help him somehow. Suddenly a man who can fly appears right in front of Alex. He came here to call him a terrorist in public and tell him what exactly the guy is accused of. Attributed to him such crimes as the kidnapping of a head of state and the destruction of a school building. These heinous acts of terrorism have thrown the country into chaos. This man was 100% sure that defenseless little Alex was responsible for all of this, but the boy wouldn't admit to any of these accusations, and just kept quiet. Because no one would have believed him anyway. In fact, behind it all is the one who planned all these crimes, and competently escaped. Eventually the silence was taken as a sign of agreement. And then began the show for all the public who came to see the villain. At first glance, someone might think that he was just a student or a simple child who didn't understand his power, but one should never let his appearance fool you. This was the kind of phrase that was used to convince the common people. And to confirm all of the above, and not to seem empty, people will now be shown a video of the terrorists who carried out the attack, allegedly starring Alex. In which case, the people will just have to watch and be convinced. This video starts with the headline "Kidnapping the President." It shows Alex in a birthday suit, holding a large piece of paper in front of him, with which he shows what he wanted to convey. It was probably done so that the thug would not be identified by his voice. He initially said hello and then introduced himself by calling the entire group supervillains. The point of this video was to talk about the kidnapping of the president, and ask viewers to guess who they really are. Just 3 weeks before the publication of that scandalous video, Alex was waiting for an interview for an intern position in a small company. Suddenly, the director comes running out of his office and starts yelling the guy's name all over the hallway. He had obviously read his resume, and was ready to hire him even without a personal interview. By the way, the director's name was Henry. He couldn't have dreamed that such a gifted person like Alex would work in such a small company. Megacorporations would not be happy. Such a strong reaction was because the guy goes to the Leadership Academy, which is the best school for super people in the whole country. All of its graduates are at the top of society, lending their talents. The principal was a big fan of the school, and he was honored to hire a Superman. He basically said all the right things, but there's one thing: Alex is an F-class superhero. This class is considered the lowest and most useless, and he's not accepted by society at all. In that case, it didn't take long for the director to literally kick the guy out of the office building. As a result, he hit his head on the asphalt and started to cry a lot in the background of the whole situation. By the way, the man who was sitting next to him wearing headphones was hired without an interview, and without even taking off his headphones. While the guy was lying on the floor completely without mood, the doggy, instead of pitying him, decided to steal the briefcase and run away in an unknown direction. You could say it's a normal day in the life of a F-grade student, just bad luck. Meanwhile, students with normal abilities start the day in a completely different way, because they overslept a little, take sandwiches in their teeth, and fly with them to their studies. On the way they are greeted by small children, and the old people respond very negatively. Because of these sudden flights they can be frightened. Then this angry man looked around, and his gaze stopped on Alex, because he was wearing the uniform of this magical academy, a great opportunity to speak out at him for all those who flew overhead. In the moment, because Alex was looking too closely at his granddaughter and grandfather, they got scared and thought that the guy wanted to take revenge on them. But in fact, it was not like that. Thanks to his one of all other useless skills, the guy managed to find out that these two were born in August. This means that they can recommend a great pastry shop nearby. The only problem is that it's very popular and the tables are booked up for a month in advance, so they should definitely get in line and try the birthday cake. The superpower of being able to see other people's birthdates looks really pathetic in front of all the other students. In general, the appearance of superhumans in this world occurred suddenly. According to research conducted, strong experiences experienced in adolescence can develop a person's power, but the fact is that if the experience is ordinary, then the superpower will be the same. Because the guy was overthinking, he quite accidentally hit his head on another student, who was several times bigger than him, and the personal class was correspondingly much better. In such cases, Alex usually knowingly asks whether he should call an ambulance right away or not. Thanks to his ability, the guy decided to find out when this man's birthday is, and as it turned out today, so he immediately took out a celebratory clapper and launched confetti in honor of his birthday. Since Alex has such a great skill, he always carries clappers and presents with him to make people happy. I'm sure the big guy was very pleased, but he just didn't show it, and with a menacing face he asked me to let go of his hand. Alex got off scot-free this time, but next time he might be unlucky enough to have to keep his eyes on the road. This is such a hard life at the student F class. Wherever they come, they will always be treated as garbage. Well, it is not surprising, because no matter how it is, not all super people are equal, and as a rule in educational institutions, the weak are always subjected to bullying. Even making friends in these become quite a challenge. The student council is well aware of this problem, so they decided to round up all the F-class students and quarantine them in a room reserved for the school's scum, too pathetic to be called superhumans. It was clear that this class was going to be a cesspool, where normal education would be impossible. Absolutely everyone was doing their own thing, like sleeping, playing on the phone, smoking cigarettes, and so on. The superpowers they possessed were used for fun. No one even tried to use them for their intended purpose, unlike Alex. And it went on like that for 3 years. Every day the guy came to study, and he understood what was waiting for him behind that door, a classroom full of desperate classmates, who had lost any hope because of discrimination. But this day everything changed. Alex saw that all the students were sitting in their seats, the class was completely silent, and there was a new teacher, who had an RPG behind his back. The teacher was waiting for him and asked him to sit down as soon as possible. They were waiting for him because Alex was the head of the class. Because of the strong shock, the guy didn't even realize where to sit at once. Now that we're all gathered, the teacher has decided to introduce himself once again. His name is Samuel, and from today he's going to be the class teacher of Group F. Now the fun begins. Today's extracurricular activity is the kidnapping of the president. On the way home, Samuel talked to someone on the phone, and that person was clearly outraged that a man had been appointed classroom teacher of F class. After all, with his skills, you're supposed to teach at least A-class people. It's nice to hear compliments, but it's best to save them for later. Now everything needs to be prepared before the boys start to actively pursue their curriculum. A lot of interesting things are ahead. Even the interlocutor who is now talking to the teacher does not understand what he is signing up for in case he helps. The first thing, the boys will be sent on a small excursion. The next day the students started to behave not so well. First of all, they were not used to learning, and secondly, the material was quite boring. If this is an attempt to start another useless drill, there may soon be a Class F riot, and if it's some kind of joke, it sucks and it hasn't been funny for a long time. The kids are starting to think it's a prank and the gun the teacher is holding isn't real. Of course, such behavior of students in the middle of class is unacceptable. To dispel the bad thoughts from their heads, Samuel immediately began to take action, namely released a large amount of multicolored smoke in the direction of students. This is his personal superpower. If a person inhales the smoke, no one will believe a word he says, but don't worry too much, because there will be no difference between those who inhaled the smoke. Everyone in the class can talk to each other in peace. Some of the boys picked up the phone to inform someone about what was happening, and at the same time to check whether they would be trusted or not. Since it was forbidden to use the phone in class, Samuel picked up some chalk and threw it at those students who broke the rules. By some miracle, the chalk only managed to break the phones into pieces. After that, they asked him to be a little more serious and to treat the class normally. The most important thing is to listen to your teacher, unless you want to be a liar for the rest of your life. At the big break, the kids went to the cafeteria. They clearly had a lot to think about. The blackmail teacher is a psychopath. Where did he come from? The guys also solved one more important question. One girl from the class, very much in love with some guy, and literally shining from this feeling, but she urgently needs to know whether it is mutual or not. For this she turned to her classmate, who thanks to his abilities can always correctly answer a question consisting of a maximum of 2 answers. As a result, to get an answer to this question with the answer options love or not did not work. This indicates that there is a third option in this question, such as hate. Having realized this, the girl began to cry bitterly, because her love ended before it began. In spite of all that, no one had begun to take the teacher seriously yet. In the meantime, there was a news flash on the TV from the city center, where superheroes were now in full swing. The bank robbers got what they deserved, all thanks to a team of heroes called the Quadra. By the way, the current Prime Minister used to be a member of this team, and it was under his leadership that the Quadras were appointed to the Presidential Guard Service. Quadra is a non-profit organization founded by A-class members of the Leadership Academy. When people say the word superheroes, they mean them. And they totally deserve it, because every day they protect the citizens with their superpowers. But recently not only the citizens, but the president himself. Right as we were watching the news, the Class A kids came up and just started laughing at their lower class counterparts. Because they admired the news heroes too much. Alex was also told that if he wanted an autograph, he could go to one of the A students, because they could do it several times faster than the older F students, because they're all useless and destitute. One of the girls sitting here can't take the nerve, and tries to throw punches at this upstart. Her opponent is Logan, a Class A wielder. His superpower is predicting the development of events and actions. From this we can understand that he understands in advance how he will be attacked, so it becomes much easier to return from the blow. In the end it happened, and then a powerful retaliatory strike was delivered, after which the girl flew to the other end of the room. Alex immediately ran to her aid, but luckily she was all right. There are only 2 classes at this school. The A class is where most of the students get in. The mere fact that a person has superpowers makes them special, so being placed in the A class is just proof that they're exceptional. And on the subject of the F class, take a guy called Andreas. His superpower is that he can turn garbage into cigarette butts. It would seem that the ability to recognize birth dates would be the worst, but it turns out it could be this. If a person's superpower is completely useless, they're bound to end up in F class. The self-important A-class kids are constantly trying to ruin the lives of their lower-class counterparts. Now there's a crazy teacher, what could be better? This girl's ability is just as funny, forget her Mia. When she says the word UFO, everyone around her is bound to turn around, even if they don't want to. There's also someone in the group who doesn't want to be a superhero at all. The only thing he's interested in is his favorite anime figurine that he'd give anything for. That describes the F class pretty well. It's hard to imagine all these people kidnapping the president. Samuel would have a much better chance of success with the A class students. Suddenly, Alex is approached by a classmate named Jack, whose superpower is that his hair changes color when failure is imminent. From this we can conclude that everything is fine for the time being. The only adequate theory was that the teacher was probably joking, and no one would kidnap anyone. When he opened his eyes, he woke up in the bus with the rest of his class and the teacher. He thought it was a dream, but then realization came. He is really with the whole group moving in an unknown direction on a huge bus. The disembarkation took place near the Blue House. From this point on, Samuel started calling his students soldiers, and upon arrival said it was time to kidnap the president. Yet the teacher immediately decided to remind that the guys no one will help, and they should not even try to call the police, because at the moment no one can believe them. As it turned out, soldiers have already been convinced of this long ago, because almost everyone made a call to the police or to their relatives. They all got completely different answers. If you got a good cop, he'd just ask you to stop the prank, or stop smoking. But if you got a bad cop, he'd threaten the law, and say he'd make you answer for making a false call. The crazy teacher was right. Nobody really believes kids. While the kids were in a trance, he took turns shoving them all into the bus. Some of them even tried to call for help in their deep sleep, but all to no avail. Samuel quietly continued to do his job. Since Alex is the head teacher, he has to do his best to protect his class. Everything seemed so unreal. The kids had no idea how bad things really were, or what they were signing up for. Before it started, Alex tried to negotiate with the teacher. He and everyone here had no idea what had happened between the teacher and the president. The guy admitted that on this operation, they would only be in the way, and promised to stay away from the police. Samuel immediately pointed his RPG at Alex's head to prove he was serious. Since the guy is still a senior, as punishment he will be placed first in the row during the storming of the president's house. My classmates were really worried about their comrade. In the end, Mia couldn't stand by and just watch this. She decided to take matters into her own hands. As we already know, the girl can distract absolutely any person with the word UFO, but Samuel, as if realized in advance that she would do it, and deliberately shut her mouth with his hand, so that she could not manage to say anything. The teacher recognized the girl's bravery, but this was the side of listening to your elders. Since the guys are fighting, Samuel decides to do it again. The kid's abilities don't work on him. Meanwhile, Alex, who is under the muzzle of the RPG, just starts to bleed cold sweat. He hasn't felt such fear for a long time. The situation is extremely serious. Once again, the children are convinced that their teacher is not joking. To waste no time, Samuel promptly ordered his soldiers to grab their gear from the sack and change their clothes. At the same time, some man was watching them from the roof of the bus. He was dressed exclusively in dark colors, and behind him stood a spirit of lambs. At one point Samuel felt the presence of a man behind him, but when he turned around there was no one there, so he put it down to the wind, and his excitement that these fools had infected him with. Well, the fun begins. The F-class students will have to break into the Blue House to see if they can kidnap the President of Korea. The teacher is currently reconnoitering the area. From what we can tell from what we've seen, the guards are busy preparing for tomorrow's event, and the entrance is planned for the east entrance. In fact, Samuel himself has kidnapped these children and forced them to do something they don't want to do, but unfortunately in this case, even tears won't help. Alex realized that his classmates were very scared and tried to calm them down with words of support. Since the teacher still hadn't given up the plan of action, Andreas decided to ask him directly how they would get into the building. All the guys heard in response was that we go in, grab the president and get out. The plan is genius. As it was originally said, Alex will go first, because he is in charge and should lead the team. The guy didn't deny anything and said that he would do everything, but first he asked everyone to calm down and act with a cool head. The main danger was that the group had only one try, no plans could be made. Looking at the guards standing on the perimeter, the soldiers realized that they had almost no chance. The only good thing was that some of them looked very tired and wanted to sleep, which meant that their attention span was several times lower than usual. Even so, the students managed to give away their location when one of the groups stepped on a small branch, after which it broke and made a loud noise. A half-sleeping guard heard this and radioed that there were trespassers on the premises. But even in this situation, Samuel did not hesitate, went to the guard's back, and hit him on the head with his metal bazooka, after which he screamed and fell to the ground already unconscious. The other guards have already raised the alarm. It is necessary to go inside as soon as possible. The children started running in a completely random direction, because they had no other choice but to move towards the house and then to act according to the situation. Everyone was crying except Andreas, who was the most resilient. As suddenly on their way they meet the first two armed guards, and stop abruptly. And what to do young guys in such a situation, what they wanted from them at all. As suddenly Alex had a flashback, he moved to the day when he was able to enter the academy. Everyone laughed at him, and the guy knew that his superpower was very lame. From that moment he began to infringe just in everything. No company did not want to take even an internship student F class. It is a stigma with which it is simply impossible to live and befriend someone from the A class, generally from the realm of fantasy. They all consider themselves a superior race, and with this all just nothing to do. Then the memories are abruptly cut off. A guy named Archie comes out of the crowd and uses his superpower, which allows him to muffle the sound around him. And it really worked. The guards let their guard down, and were scared out of their wits, because they thought they had lost their hearing. Archie had no idea that his power would ever be useful. He had previously only used it when he was studying in the library. As the opportunity arose, the boys immediately began to run on. But things didn't go quite according to plan. 2 more armed guards ran out from the other side. In this case, Mia starts to work. She says the magic word UFO out loud, and all the guards against their own will start to turn in a completely different direction. Thus the girl wins a little more time for her group. Unfortunately, one of the students also got caught by the word UFO, but he was quickly brought to his senses and the guys ran on. Along the way, the students started to realize that they were even getting something out of working together. Alex was especially happy about that. All their lives they had been called losers, and today at least they had already proved to themselves that it was not so. It was only a short time before they reached the central building. Somehow, and in the end managed to break away. Everyone was very tired, because never before in his life so fast and long-running. To be frank, even Samuel a little tense in this situation. In general, someone was happy, someone was sad. Everyone had completely different emotions. This blue building is the president's residence. The guys are very close. Roughly speaking, the last push is left. Just in case, one of the members of the group decided to ask once again whether it was really necessary to take the president hostage. In response, the teacher said that in this country juvenile delinquents are usually given minor punishments, so don't worry so much. So less talk, more action. It is too late to backtrack and start backing up. Besides, these guards couldn't even touch the guys. Even though they are F class, they are still considered super people. Ordinary people are far from them. The A-class guards are in a completely different place right now, so it's the perfect chance to do the deed right now. Samuel spoke quite confidently, but what everyone was afraid of happened. Jack's hair color began to change, which can only mean one thing: in the near future the whole group is going to fail. Suddenly, there was a huge explosion behind the teacher. This was due to the fact that someone literally started throwing cars at the guys. They came one after another, a few at a time. At this point, Samuel was clearly downcast, his face showing that things were extremely bad, and it would be almost impossible to get away with it. It turned out to be the head of the Presidential Security Service and a member of the group Quadra, called him Cameron, superhero, already extremely angry that now criminals work exclusively at night. Because of people like them have to work overtime and do not sleep, literally fall asleep for a few hours and again rise. Before he did his job, he even wanted to talk to the guys and find out what had brought them here at such a late hour. Alex couldn't even close his mouth because of the strong shock. The hero who was shown on TV is standing in front of him. Looking around, Cameron couldn't understand what a bunch of school kids were doing here. Suddenly someone from the team could not keep his mouth shut, and started pointing the finger at the superhero and said that he was from the Quadra. Someone like Cameron will definitely defeat the teacher in the blink of an eye. On the one hand, there's no offense to the truth, but on the other hand, it was pretty upsetting. Then the second girl started saying they were being held hostage by terrorists. Of course, an experienced crime fighter listens to such tales every day, so he didn't take her word for it right away. The situation turns out to be quite funny. The girl tells the truth, and in response he hears that it is not so easy to deceive a superhero, because almost every terrorist starts talking like that when he is about to be caught. In that case, Cameron offered to go to the station without any aggression. There he would have plenty of time to listen to all the testimonies of the children. Unfortunately, Samuel didn't like this outcome, so he looked for his gun and fired 3 accurate shots at the superhero. The kids couldn't believe he'd do such a thing. Thanks to his powers, the superhero managed to stop all 3 bullets straight in front of him. It's just a unique sight. From the look on the teacher's face, you can tell he knows exactly what will happen to him if he is apprehended. As it turns out, Cameron knows him personally, and instead of striking back, just asked him what he was doing here. The guys also realized that the 2 men were probably acquaintances, because they'd been talking for too long. After 3 shots were fired, there's usually no stipulation for such actions. Personally, the superhero had already realized that Samuel's presence meant that the assassination attempt on the president was real. They were apparently quite good acquaintances. He even started to tear up. He was really truly sorry for what had happened. The man was a good teacher. How did he end up like this? Samuel replied rather aggressively, because only these little ones have the right to call him a teacher. This information even smiled a bit, because a real teacher would never involve his students in treason, or at least attempted treason. It is also punishable by capital punishment, so there is no difference. Then he activated his ability to control any object in sight and took the cars up into the sky again. It would seem as if the guys are starting to do well, the team united, but suddenly this hero appears, and now he is going to use his power to the fullest. What will happen after that with the F-class? By chance, Cameron noticed with the corner of his eye that he lifted the minister's car. His paycheck, if he damages it, he has to carefully put it back in place. By the way, when they heard the phrase, punishable by capital punishment, they were ready to be destroyed. But still decided to try to bargain, because in fact, no terrible crimes have not had time to commit. What a bunch of losers against one of the strongest heroes, to fight with him with the help of their so-called superpowers, the same as coming with a knife to a gunfight. The students truly believe that if they tried their best, they could still succeed at something, even against a member of the quad team. But apparently not this time. Kemerova slowly flew to the 2 guys, hugged them a little and said that he had already seen their superpowers through the security footage, quite nice tricks, and then a little bit showed them the car. Pupils should understand that it is not easy for the hero, because he has duties that he must fulfill, but since the bandits are minors, he has to restrain himself, so that there is no scandal because of abuse of power, but also the hero is a little sleepy, so anything can happen, a little miss, and the whole person as it was not, by pure chance. At this moment Alex was trying to understand if they could do anything against this monster, as suddenly there was a strong explosion on the territory of the mansion, which was surely visible from a kilometer away from the scene of the incident. This man's name was Andy. He is an A-class, and his superpower is superhuman strength, which allow him to lift the strongest weights, and to hurl buses at superheroes, the president's protectors. It really was an accurate throw. And after everyone who was here just disappeared, now Cameron was curious to know if it was the type who threw the bus to F-class or not. Finally the guys broke away. They were running so fast, some of them might throw up now. Alex was insanely grateful, because Andy had really just saved their hides. As it turned out, the very same guy Alex ran into at the beginning of the school year came to the rescue. By chance he managed to see the teacher pushing the students into the bus. This aroused great interest, so Andy decided to follow him on a bicycle. On the one hand it was good that the kids were saved, but on the other hand Samuel could not even imagine that a student from A-class would intervene for the scum students from F-class. To keep the teacher's image at least somehow, Samuel announced to everyone that the surprise field trip was about to start. Everyone was going to have a lot of fun. Of course Andy couldn't be fooled so easily. He grabbed the RPG the teacher was carrying and crushed it with just one hand. He wondered, since this was a regular field trip, why the teacher was threatening his student with such a heavy weapon. This is awkward. This gun was rented, now we have to pay for it. Anyone on this planet knows that F-class superpowers are good for combat. Andy wondered what Samuel was doing with these weaklings. Could he be using them as cannon fodder? This hero was clearly determined to save everyone, The interesting thing is whether he will succeed in kicking the ass of a rogue teacher who uses children for his own personal gangster interests, and teaches them all the worst. The next morning, the guys in class noticed that their weaker colleagues had arrived suspiciously late today. What could this mean? Of course, the guys didn't miss the opportunity to mock them a bit, calling them jerks and asking them to come early next time. Today, the F-class guys looked more terrified than ever. The guys who had just tried to humiliate them were horrified at the moment. They'll remember that grim look for a long time to come, wondering what happened to them. Alex's group was exhausted this morning, and considering what had happened yesterday, there was nothing to be surprised about. By the way, during yesterday's conversation, the kids started to admit again that the teacher had dragged them here by force, and used some kind of strange smoke. Initially, Samoy didn't even realize what kind of fog he was talking about, but then he remembered that he had told his students a story about magic smoke, after which everyone stops believing them. In reality, it was not a superpower, but a smoke bomb, a psychological trick that worked just fine. Then the question arises, why nobody believed the guys when they asked for help? Everything was well thought out here too. The F class was selected for me for a reason. Nobody cares about a bunch of losers. They are not even listened to, let alone never helped. If the teacher had taken the students from the A class, the operation would have ended before it even started. Those words were like a sledgehammer to the back of Alex's head. They completely shattered the confidence of the entire team. In the morning, even getting out of bed and going to school took a lot of effort. By the way, the news was already reporting that last night the Blue House was attacked by an unknown group of terrorists. To completely prevent further attacks and get security, the Blue House has issued an official statement announcing the postponement of today's parade by 2 weeks. At this point, the president is completely safe, all thanks to the timely intervention of the security detail led by Cameron of the Quadra. Samuel didn't despair, but now he would have more time to prepare for another attack. He was even thinking that maybe he should have recruited a better team of superpowers when suddenly someone right behind him, instead of walking through the door, decided to smash through the wall with his fist. It was Andy again, and apparently he was in a bad mood. The teacher didn't even wonder about it, he just greeted the boy. But still he was wondering why such a great and powerful A-class student was sticking his nose into the affairs of a pathetic F-class. By the way, it was pointless to try to rat on the teacher, because the police and the principal wouldn't believe a student anyway. But what happened next would shock anyone. Andy said he wanted to transfer and put his application in writing. Of course, it was almost impossible to refuse, so the teacher signed the document, and today Andy started his classes in the new group. When the students saw him, they freaked out. What's the top of the class doing in this poor group? Maybe it's a new kind of bullying. The guy was so huge, he could barely fit at those little F tables. When Alex realized that Andy wanted to sit down with him, he asked him to wait a bit while he put his things away, but it turned out that the overly strong student threw the briefcase on his desk and broke it into small pieces. Alex was frightened, because the briefcase could have accidentally fallen on his side. After this incident, Samuel said to try not to use too much force, because there's no super sturdy state-of-the-art equipment in F class, so everything breaks pretty easily. I wonder what he'll make the students do today. I wish he'd give them a normal lesson like math or literature. The first thing that caught the teacher's eye was that there were textbooks on the desks. You need to put them away immediately. They're useless here. Also, you need to change into your gym uniform immediately. There's a super strength training session today. Samuli will be judging his students at the presidential parade in 2 weeks. Basically, the problem is clear, but there's one thing, they're F class, and they have no superpowers that can be trained at all. What the girl means is that she doesn't understand how to use their stupid superpowers, much less in combat. Andy couldn't understand what was wrong with her, because superpower training is part of the general curriculum. But as it turned out, the F class had its own training program, and it had nothing to do with the general one. Once upon a time, a long time ago, they did have practice, but the teacher saw several guys for useless and just left. Based on all this, you can understand that the students just don't believe in themselves, so the teacher decided to tell them one phrase: you are who you think you are. The boys will remain a bunch of losers if they continue to think of themselves in that way. Especially yesterday, it was clearly seen. Guardian of Order Class A treated the guys as if their place on the garbage dump. Is such an attitude to themselves all satisfied, and there is no desire to change something for the better. Yesterday Samuel saw what his students are capable of. It's time to become stronger. The teacher is sure his students will be able to gain real strength. Alex wondered why he was so sure of that and how to confirm his words. Samuel has been preparing for this issue his whole life. At the moment, he has a large number of medals and diplomas behind him, which he earned while studying and teaching at another academy. Mostly all the medals are exclusively for first place. The most notable award here is a Certificate of Excellence from the Elite Forces Institute. Alex couldn't believe his eyes, because this is the best academy for super people in the whole country. Now the guys fully know who Samuel really is. At first glance he might seem like some random terrorist who targeted the president. But as far as superhero training goes, he's the best in the world. It's not hard to guess that a teacher can help his students a lot more than the president. It's time to start using your head and think rationally. All you have to do is follow Samuel's instructions for the next 2 weeks, and then the guys will reap the golden fruits of their labors. Meanwhile, the terrified president sat in his fancy blue house and hugged a pillow. From the hole in the wall, you can tell it was a very hot night last night. Cameron had arrived to give him an update on the night's incident. Despite pleas not to worry, the president couldn't stop doing it. And when he learned that the terrorists had escaped, he went blank. I guess he'll be hugging his pillow all day. I wish he'd hugged his wife like that. But despite all this, Cameron assured the president that he was fully protected and no one would dare lay a finger on him. At that moment Samuel was saying the same thing to his students and assured them that under his guidance they would be able to kidnap the president without any problems, if they practiced hard for 2 weeks. But the problem is that only the teacher wants the president to come, and the students don't want him to come. But even so, where would the training take place, since the F class is not allowed to use the gym? In that case, the teacher had already called someone to help. The man's name was Dylan. At first glance he looked like some kind of priest, or a hardcore metalhead. First of all, even instead of a greeting, the type said that he had studied with this not-for-teacher. Someone in the class couldn't help but call Dylan a metalhead. The answer was quite harsh. Black metal is Satan's music that destroys young souls. God forbid anyone should listen to it. Then what's Dylan's guitar case doing behind his back? We'll get to that in a little bit. The superpower he has is called creating dimensions. All he has to do is visualize space in his head, and his pocket dimension is complete. But the downside is that pocket dimensions are too small to be considered a truly separate dimension. This power can be very dangerous if it falls into the wrong hands. For example, a supervillain with this power could stealthily lock someone up in a pocket dimension, or create a secret laboratory for human experimentation. In short, this kid is just the best. In the worst case, we will create a secret confession, because he has long ago decided to use his power for the glory of God. Since all the information was very superficial, Alex decided to find out where exactly the pocket dimension is located. Dylan decided not to tell 100 times, but to show once. For starters, he gave Alex a lollipop in the form of beer. It is the key. You have to bite it when you want to leave the dimension. Well, we know how to get out, but how to get in, we'll show you how to get in. Dylan grabs the guy's hand, and points it right at himself, thus starting the process of moving into the pocket dimension. At first Alex, along with his friends, just filed down, until they hit the ground. Everything around them was exclusively in white colors. Even Samuel moved with them. He probably would have fallen flat on his back. From that point on, the transfer was complete, and the boys found themselves in a unique place, and somehow they had already changed into their sports uniforms. It was one of Dylan's dimensions, called the Arena of Trials. Samuel is sure he'll never get used to the movement, and Dylan is even worse, having to suck people through his body. The teacher's assistant made this place for his own training, but Samuel insisted on adapting it for the students. In that case, there's no question about the training venue, because it's 10 times better than the academy gym. But what would be the training? I mean, Andy can pull iron to get stronger, but the rest of us can't train superpowers like that. The teacher said not to worry because they've already taken care of everything. Archie is the deputy head of the group. Unlike Alex, he is reliable and responsible, so people usually trust him with important problems. So even now, he was invited to be the first to push the button. After pushing it, the guy was locked in a cage. This was not supposed to happen. It was just Samuel's way of making fun of his students, but in general there was nothing to worry about. This cage would just scan Archie's superpowers. He had nothing to worry about. Dinan then walked over to the students and began to ask them if they remembered how they got their superpowers. After all, this should be the most memorable day for them. Meanwhile, the superpower scans are complete. Archie looks lousy. But that doesn't change anything, because the process of creating a training ground based on the information was started. When it was ready, the boy moved into the arena. Suddenly, strange little balls started running in front of him. The point of them was to start making horrible, loud noises that would literally make your blood boil. To drown out the sound, Archie, of course, started using his superpower, which allows you to make the surroundings completely silent. At first the guy even managed, but then with every second these balls were getting bigger and bigger. Even the audience was starting to get deaf from such a strong pressure on their ears. At one point there were too many of them, and the power that was there was not enough to shut them all up. The student fell to his knees in despair and started screaming. Then after another use of the ability, its radius increased significantly, and all the balls became silent in an instant. This small training was enough to increase the radius of the power. This happened because a great threat induces a great desire to identify it. Hope is the root of any superpower. The stronger the roots, the taller the tree. The purpose of this training is to strengthen the hope from which the student's power grows. This kind of training is a premium class. Even A-class students don't have easy access to it. They are very lucky to have Samuel as their teacher. One girl told her not to get cocky, because the group doesn't need a terrorist teacher, but still, she doesn't mind training, and wants to get started as soon as possible, so she contradicts herself. So Samuel wasn't lying. Archie's strength increased after one training session. I wonder what will happen to everyone else. Jessica's superpower, who can't decide whether a teacher is good or bad, is that she can see the person she wants to see in front of her right now. A huge pile of garbage appeared in front of Andreas, which he began to turn into cigarette butts. In general, everyone faced their own obstacles and overcame them to become stronger. And finally it's Alex's turn. Maybe this will work for him. Maybe this is the opportunity he's been waiting for all his life. It's best not to get ahead of yourself, because there's no telling what the guy might face, and frankly, he's a little scared right now. As suddenly there was an error while scanning. For the superpower that allows you to see birthdays, the system couldn't come up with any training. It even tried several times, but all to no avail. But if the training doesn't start, then why won't it be given a decent reason? A girl named Amy was standing next to her. She decided to describe the reason instead of the training program, and said that the system has no time to waste on flawed students like Alex. That's what it means. Her superpower is that she has absolute memory. She's the only F class with a useful ability. Amy was originally assigned to a class, but she decided to transfer of her own accord. The reason was that she can't breathe the same air as those A-class upstarts, so she's considered a special case, not like the rest of the gray mass of F-class. Samuel asked why the girl refused to train. Amy replied that there was nothing wrong with her powers, and she didn't want those creepy robots testing her brain. Besides, as practice has shown, this training program is not suitable for everyone. Not all powers can be useful in battle. After that, Alex was really down. Is he the biggest loser of the group, that even such an advanced training program couldn't help him? The guys noticed that the guy was feeling really bad, and decided to support him. Don't be so hard on yourself. A lot of people here feel useless. Remember that blonde guy from the Quadra? He handled all the students without any problems, so at this point, this simulator means nothing. Andreas is a good fighter, but fists don't work if your enemy can throw cars. And his superpower was useless during the operation. And whatever this one-time setback, the guy's not gonna give up just because of it. Speaking of fighting strength, no one said a word to Amy the night of the operation, even though her absolute memory was completely useless against Cameron. The girl went off the chain and started saying that she should communicate with her as if she were one of them, thus exalting herself above the others. Alex thought to stop them and asked them not to get together, because this is the first training of the F-class superpowers. This day should be remembered. Alex told everyone that they didn't have to worry about him, because in any case he didn't expect anything from his power, so everyone who was lucky, keep studying, and he would go on doing math. He took a bite of the lollipop and almost instantly started moving backwards. He was madly happy for his classmates. As they say, let's hope she was satisfied, but these sharp remarks of hers were absolutely unnecessary. Alex made a wise choice, so she too decided to sit down at her textbooks, took a bite of her lollipop and headed back. Completely without mood, Alex went to the soccer field to see how happy people live, and to think why he is ignored, because he is also a Superman, just his abilities are not as bright as others. Probably it is because people prefer to take off on those who are a little better than them. They do not have the courage to provoke those who are much superior to them. They can only show their envy to a group when they know they can get away with it. Ordinary people will always say that the F-class is no better than they are, because they could not see that they by means of these practical useless abilities make life easier for themselves. His father always told his son that his superpower was born of a strong desire, which directly proves that a person has a sharp mind. But unfortunately, times have changed. Now only brains can't achieve everything. Alex wants something more, something that could make him stand out from the gray mass. Suddenly something hit him in the head with incredible force. The blow was so powerful that he fell from the bench to the ground. When Alex opened his eyes, he saw that he had been thrown a very ordinary bracelet. Then a little girl ran up and asked him to put the light back on because it was hers. Apparently this is the next sufficient generation of Class A. At such a young age, this little girl is already much stronger than ordinary men. The little girl was very grateful to have her bracelet back, so she decided to introduce herself and say that she was in this class. Her name was Maria. Then she asked to see what kind of power Alex had. She had already seen how other people could fly and do cool things with fire. The guy apologized and said his superpower had nothing to do with sprinkles and fire. The only thing he could do was find out other people's birthdays. At first glance, you'd think Maria would be more surprised by this information than by all the cool fire stuff. She was actually thinking about how to mess with Alex. In the end, she told me when her dad's birthday was, and after that she called herself a superhero, because I had no problem finding out when all her relatives' birthdays were. So it turns out it's very easy to be a superhero. The guy couldn't stand such humiliation, and decided to just fall on the floor. Even a little girl realizes that such a superpower is absolutely useless. Suddenly Andy came to these benches and saw Alex lying on the floor. The boy immediately asked what he was doing here. Andy answered that he had come out of that dimension because he didn't like this kind of training, but it was so strange, because with their help a man could become the strongest hero, if he took the time to do it every day. That's the problem. Andy doesn't want to get any stronger, because being too strong isn't always a good thing. This information shocked Alex. Does Andy have no idea what life is like for a weakling like an ordinary F-class student? It all sounds like some kind of arrogant nonsense. What is the real reason why Andy moved to F-class? He was the strongest in Class A. Now because he came, the others feel very disadvantaged because Andy is a constant reminder that no one from F-class will ever be good enough for the voice. In short, no one in F-class wants someone that strong here. Since all of the above was on emotion, the guy only at the end of the speech realized that he had let himself snapped at a man who is at least 10 times stronger than he is. Still behind all this, hidden in the bushes, with their binoculars, watched Samuel. Now he knows exactly where he needs to start. In this case, Andy felt no anger, because he had been told the truth. He acted like a smart, proper person, and decided to leave the place where he was not welcome. Just at that moment, the teacher came out of the bushes and called Alex quite cruel. The teachers were so hopeful that he would have at least one student to rely on. Anyway, if Andy does go back to a class, it's Alex's fault. The team will lose a very important member because of him. It's hard to even get my head around how such a strong man could take offense at the words of an ordinary guy from F class. They're on completely different levels. In general, a lot of strange things have happened lately. The best student in the school came to the worst class and hooked up with a loser who can't even train his own ability. Hearing that Alex calls his ability pathetic, the teacher asked him to follow him, because now there will be a special lesson separately for the kid. In the end, the guys came to the police station, wondering what kind of unique lesson could be here. Meanwhile, the precinct was in full swing, getting tons of calls, checking evidence, testifying. They were also fighting a lot because they didn't have enough employees with superpowers. There was a tendency for ordinary people to stop breaking the law, but people with powers were doing it more and more often. After analyzing the situation, Samuel concluded that apparently the regular police had not been told who had tried to break into the blue house, so it was okay. As it turned out, the workers at the station knew Samuel. They even knew that he had previously worked as a teacher at a rather prestigious school, and then moved to the academy. The teacher said that he just came to say hello and find out how his friends were doing. In this case, the comrade decided to tell that recently there was a series of destruction of people. The news now only talk about it. To investigate these crimes entrusted to this department, the last 2 months the guys are only busy looking for the person who committed it. From the last crime scene, footage was obtained and one witness came forward. From this we can conclude the perpetrator is either playing with the police or he's blundered. The video only shows a man's back, but it's a clue. The only thing that came out was that the perpetrator was of medium height and had a thick beard. Alex seemed to understand what the special lesson was about, so he immediately started the training. The guys started dictating and writing Samuel the terrorist who attacked the presidential palace, please arrest him. The teacher immediately snatched the sheet from his student and tore it into small pieces. Samuel then asked his friend to show the videotape to Alex. Initially, he was against it because the regulations do not allow showing classified material to ordinary civilians. But the teacher insisted and asked him to give this guy a chance. This boy just has to make police work easier. Looking closely in front of the boy's eyes, numbers slowly began to gather. Eventually, he was able to find out the perp's date of birth, November 20th, 1987. Initially, the cop doesn't even remember why the kid said the date out loud. After Samuel said that this student can find out the date of birth of a criminal from a video recording, that's how strong his ability is. The policeman did not believe it at once, even managed to get angry and asked for more, if not joking. But nevertheless asked his colleagues for a list of people born on that day. Alex suddenly put his hand up and said that the list would no longer be needed, then pointed his finger at the man who was trying to leave quietly, and said that he had the same date of birth as the man in the video. The perp, realizing there was nowhere to go, grabbed the guy, put his knife hand to his throat and started threatening him. First of all, everyone was shocked that his hands turned into blades, and secondly it became clear why there were no weapons at the scene of the crime, because the perpetrator of these terrible crimes was a superhuman. The bandits turned out to be a sick man. He confessed that he liked to watch him destroy his victims. This strong desire has awakened in him a superpower, thanks to which he can turn his hands into blades. In general, if the police want to save the boy's life, everything must be resolved peacefully. Deep down, the villain was incredibly angry at Alex for the trouble, and whispered a promise to destroy him as soon as they get to a safe place. As a rule, not all super people are heroes. Some of them prefer to remain villains, and weaklings like Alex are mostly always victims. Despite the situation, Samuel was very proud of his student. He gave very accurate information, and was able to find the culprit while in the police station. The longer the guys did not act, the more the bandit began to threaten. Everyone realized long ago that he was not kidding. but guys like that have absolutely no chance to resist. First, he diverted the bandit's attention to his eyes, and then discreetly took out a stun gun and shot him. Blade hands, it's not even a superpower, and it's hard to call it that. Of course, Alex also suffered from the shocker, but there is no other way out of the situation. That's how people can become heroes without even using their powers. The cop really thought Samuel was just messing around, but they closed the case. So the officer decided to buy dinner. Recognizing the date of birth, this is a rather rare ability. If one finds where to apply it properly, one will be provided for life. Alex doesn't realize this yet, so he can afford to call his ability boring, but that's a mistake. Since the cop was lucky enough to meet such a unique young man today, he decided to ask him for one favor: determine the date of birth of the woman in this old black and white photo. Alex said he would give it a try, but makes no guarantees, as he hasn't tried using his power on old things. First, he tried to concentrate, to imagine he was watching a video. Suddenly, Alex began to emit a bright glow. It was as if he was actually watching the video, his eyes locked on the picture. The policeman was a little shocked by what I had seen, because he had never seen anything like this before. This is the wish that is the source of his power. It finally worked. The guy was able to see this woman's birthday, February 1st, 1948, and this picture is very old. The officer admitted that it was his mom. She was only 3 years old when she lost her family in the Korean War, so she didn't know when she was born. She worked her whole life to the point of exhaustion in order to raise and educate her son. It's a little late for a man to know about it, but now he will be able to wish you a happy birthday when he comes to the cemetery again. The officer hugged Alex emotionally and thanked him, because it meant a lot to him. Well, now it's time to find out if the student enjoyed the special lesson. Definitely yes, but he didn't know how to say it. In the moment, he was overwhelmed with a storm of emotions. It was nice to feel useful, but at the same time he wanted to cry a lot, and unfortunately there is a feeling that it was just a happy coincidence. And tomorrow Alex will again become useless. But this is already a definite overkill, as the guy is not yet tired of belittling himself. Because of this loser is always such a mess. They always think about bad things, set themselves up for bad things, and live badly. It is strictly forbidden to do so. Speaking of which, Samuel admits to the theory that Andy was brought into the F grade class solely because of Alex. On his first day on the job, the teacher looks out the window and sees a kid wishing Andy a happy birthday and giving him a little present. In the end, when they parted, the bully looked at the pink-wrapped present for a very long time. And his classmates were not surprised at all when they found out that today was his birthday, so the present touched him and was very memorable. It just doesn't fit in his head. Alex had the opposite feeling, not very happy, and wants to break up as quickly as possible. Now Alex realizes what an idiot he really is and starts beating himself on the head, because he didn't even think about how he might feel. It's great that realization has come, but I think he's over-dramatizing it. Training in the testing arena was to temper the students' sincere desires, which superhumans usually form based on their own self-interest. For example, the desire to hear nothing around them, to look only at what they like, or to become stronger. But in Alex's case, it didn't work out in the arena, but today, his strength has improved several times over, and that's a fact. Since the arena couldn't find a training session for the boy, the teacher took matters into his own hands and did it himself. A sincere desire to help a person broke through the walls that kept the power from growing. An ability like recognizing birthdays can only come from the purest of motives. It is his advantage to want to help people. Now no wonder why the arena hasn't given him the proper training, for he is a kind-hearted man who has nothing to do with fighting. Alexei will have no problem becoming stronger in the future. He's just a little different from his owners. After listening to this story, the kid concludes that Samuel isn't really the rebellious teacher he wants to appear to be. And it's obvious to the naked eye how important these students are to him, but it's impossible to understand why he's training them to kidnap the president. So the head boy finally wanted to know why his teacher was doing what he was doing. Meanwhile, in the Blue House, there was a conversation between the president and Cameron. When this old grandfather ran for president, his main goal was to help superhumans find their place as productive members of society. And of course, the presidency allows him to remake the blue house into a pretty pastel pink castle, and it has no effect on the country. Has done everything possible to popularize superhumans. And now, for some reason, they dare attempt to kidnap the president. Why would they even want to do that? Is this some kind of gratitude for all that's been done? More efforts must be made to catch all the supermen who are going against their president, and first of all, Cameron must now make every effort to do so in the shortest possible time. Unfortunately or fortunately, last time one of the many bandit groups managed to escape. Then an officer walked into the office that they still hadn't been able to adopt the identities of the people who just recently carried out the night attack. The first reason being the night, and the second being the abilities they were using. Realizing what kind of jerks work for the president, he slammed his glaucoma hard into his desk, from the realization that if it wasn't for Cameron, he would have definitely been kidnapped. After the president ordered everyone out and threw the expensive one after the flowers. Now he needed to calm down and order some pony beds before he had a nervous breakdown. Hearing the vase shatter, Cameron immediately fell to his knees and started cleaning up the shards. The vase was a gift from the president's wife. Suddenly, a rather powerful woman with unique superpowers walks in. Her name is Ornella. She and Cameron were close friends, so she even decided to play a little joke on him, saying he's having a tough day because he's on his knees cleaning. I wonder what brought our great powerful counselor here.